Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 27 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us on our second in a row, our Primetime edition here, 10 p.m. Eastern time start. But for our special guest here this evening, it is 7 p.m. right where he is in the greater Los Angeles area. Let's welcome in the fourth period senior writer, Dennis Bernstein, who covers the Los Angeles Kings. Dennis, how are you? And how are things going in your shelter in place?
Great to be with you, Double J. Things could be better, could be worse. We're staying healthy. We're staying smart. If you're out there wearing masks, you're not sick. We'll get through this much quicker and better. But we're doing okay. Nobody I know has contracted COVID-19, and we're just kind of waiting in place until the NHL starts, which from day one, I believe that we were going to get back on the ice.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild to see that that 3 months has gone, by so quick. And already just next week, phase 3 will be beginning in the National Hockey League. Really, really good stuff. But for those that are just joining us for the first time, our viewers on the West Coast and some even on the East Coast, this podcast, or this byproduct of our flagship podcast, all 25 and now actually 26 and now 27 of our guests, including Dennis Bernstein, has had ties with the East Coast, because now people would ask, Dennis, why would I be on the show if you have no ties to the Eastern Observer or to the East Coast? Well, you have a lot of ties here with the East Coast, and we'll get to that in just a second.
Sure.
But you have you went to school out here, and you went to Fordham University, and you also went to Rider University. Really, really small world. So let's talk about the pre-fourth period era, if you will.
Sure.
Now, you went to, as we said, you went to Fordham. You went to Rider from 1976 to 79. I don't mean to make you sound old there. But Rider, it's okay, man. Listen, Rider University, you majored in accounting. You got your bachelor's degree there. And then you took some time off, 84 to 86. You went to Fordham. Did you go? Yeah, I'm assuming you went to the Rose Hill campus, or did you go to Manhattan?
No, I was actually working for RCA Records when they were still vinyl records back in the day, and they basically underwrote my education. So I was which is, I think, on like Columbus Circle. So what I would do is I was living in Central Jersey. I'd run 18-hour days. I'd get up at 6 a.m., take the bus in from East Windsor, which is about halfway from New York to Philadelphia, work a full day at RCA, and then probably 3 days out of the week, I'd go up to Fordham for night school, go from 6 to 10, and take an hour bus ride back to East Windsor. So it was long nights, but it was worth it. I thought that an advanced education would help me in my pursuits because, Joe, back in the day, this wasn't the guy. If you had met me 30 years ago, I was a boring, overweight accountant with brown hair who was an introvert. So when you hear about people changing their lives and reinventing themselves in Los Angeles, I'm that cat. I'm that guy. So that's what it is. And then when I came out to Los Angeles with the speculative question, I got recruited. And that really helped me leverage, believe it or not, my sports media career.
Yeah, because that was actually the next question that I was actually going to bring up, because, we look at your resume here. And as we said earlier, bachelor's degree in accounting and then your MBA in finance from Fordham University. And obviously, now where you are is covering the National Hockey League, and you're all over NHL Network Radio, NHL Network on television as well. You also co-host actually the Hot Stove with Tuesday's guest, Ryan Patton, as well. And also your partner in crime over there, David Pagnotta, as well. We'll get into that in just a few moments. But now, obviously, you've done numerous gigs, and the list could go on. As a recruiter, you were also Red Bull Distribution from 2014 all the way to 20 till now, actually. And as we said off camera, happy retirement, if you will. Now you're focusing in on the National Hockey League full time. But just to clarify, what made you move from not only from New York to LA, but to do from finance all the way to sports media? Because again, you went to a great sports media school, but you majored in finance, not so much the broadcasting or the media side of things.
Well, Joe, I'm living proof that you don't need any classical training to be a success in sports media, right? Because an undergraduate degree in accounting and a major in finance doesn't get you anywhere. But I think the what I found was, Joe, the transitioning from New York to LA. I was married once before. That ended amicably. I was done in New York. There was no more dragons to slay. I just needed to restart and re-kick my life and rebrand myself. If we want to use a vernacular of today, right? And I just figured, let me get out to LA. That I went to LA, and my perception of LA back in the day was everybody's crazy and everybody's stuck in their cars. And that was in New York. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. I love New York energy. I think being in New York and LA is a big advantage business-wise. And I went out there and I was sitting on the beach in November and it was 75 degrees and the girls were, blading by in their bikinis. And on the plane, I landed at Newark Airport, still dressed for the beach. So T-shirt, shorts. It was 22 degrees. It was snowing. I was shivering. I'm going, yeah, I need to go. And so basically a month later, I packed everything I had into my Jeep, drove cross country without anything lined up. I was still a finance person. I was finance person for a while. In the LA Times. And this is when there were still newspapers and want ads. And my first thought about being a recruiter was they're not that smart. They don't work that hard and they make good money. And so I put in my application. And what happened with me was I was tasked to recruit like myself. So I could the first day I went in, and recruiting is a selling job. I had never sold anything in my life. Remember, I was an introverted accountant. I read the script. I stuttered. I stammered. I was awful. And my boss and one of my mentors looked at me and said, I probably hired the wrong guy. But that night I knew I screwed up. So I took the script. I went to the Coffee Bean in Brentwood. I read the script out loud. So they thought he was either crazy or an unemployed actor. And I went back in the second day, Joe, and I just nailed it. And when we walked out to the bullpen to make the calls, because it's like in a boiler room, it's the same thing. You're getting on the phones, a lot of phone work. My attitude was, if you don't want to talk to me, you're missing out. And that was the beginning of a 20-year career in recruiting. Now, the parallel is, Joe, like when you're recruiting, you're interviewing people, you're asking why. So at the same time, when I started, right before I left the East, I started a little fan newsletter for the Devils. I lived in New Jersey. I was a season ticket holder, and they hated it. They tried to stop it. And the last thing you could tell me is I shouldn't do something. So that kind of motivated me. And the one thing, though, it's kind of iron sharpens iron, Joe, because during the day I'd be asking people why my job, and I'd be asking players why the power play didn't work, why they didn't score. So it was constantly interviewing people. So it was the psychology of not only people that wanted jobs, but players who were trying to achieve greatness, like winning the Stanley Cup. And so I just think that helped leverage both careers. So I stayed in recruiting. And Joe, in your question on sports media isn't the greatest field to be in, right? You should have a plan B. And I did. I was lucky enough that they both aligned, that I could do both. And I was very transparent about it, right? I'm not a beat writer. I'm not at every practice, but I've been in the game 20 years. I've covered the NHL for 20 years. I know a lot of people. I leverage that relationship. So I think that if you want to do a parallel career to start, I would advocate selling, because you're going to be told no a lot of times, like you're told by PR people when you're trying to get an interview. And I just think that helps because it opens the door. You have to be conversational. I'll admit to you that I work with people from Helene Elliott, the LA Times. I'm never going to be the world's greatest writer, ever. But I'm pretty good with punctuation and grammar. Other than that, I think that you need to find your own voice. And I was lucky because I guess people trusted me, because I think one of the tips here in sports media is I can't repeat. So you can't betray trust. So I think that's kind of why I got into sales. I got into recruiting, and it was just interviewing people a lot, asking why, getting to the essence of a player, but as well.
Yeah, getting the truth is really what you look for when you do these obviously articles, interviews, etc. And it's really a remarkable story what you just told us, because you brought up the selling point, or where sales comes into play here. And it's very funny because, Dennis, you look at a lot of these entry-level jobs now, And whether it's and in sports media more specifically, and you look at, director of broadcasting, but then there's also that / sales position or sales assistant or account executive or something like that. And I know actually one guy who works for the Brooklyn Cyclones, and he's not really a salesperson, but he is a play-by-play guy. But in order to take a single A baseball job, which obviously is a no-brainer in minor league baseball, where you get your career started in the industry, you kind of got to take the sales gig. So
you have
with all of the recruiting jobs that you have from 98, 99, K-Force, 2006 to 13, Advantage Sales Marketing, then you have Green Dot, Growth Inc., Walt Disney Internet Corp. And then obviously the fourth period comes into play. 2006 was the time that you started. So let's get into that. How did the fourth period how did you get involved with the fourth period? It's
a great story, Joe. Actually, I wrote for another site called inthecrease.com. That was the predecessor website. I actually found them when I started this little thing. It was like 1998, and they were looking for writers. So I sent over my fan newsletter and said, hey, like, this is what I got. And they said, hey, this is pretty decent stuff, and we'll give you your own column. So I wrote for them for about 8 years, and then the site just imploded, a little bit of politics, whatever. And of all things, the PreFourthPeriod.com had a banner ad on In the Crease. So I clicked through the fourth period. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I look at the bottom, I need writers. And I knew this was coming to an end. So I just sent an email over to Dave Pagnotta and said, look, here's my stuff. And Dave says, yeah, I already know who you are. So let's meet at it was the NHL Awards in Vancouver in 2006. And now I'd never met Dave, and Dave has this large booming voice, and we talked on the phone. He goes, yeah, let's meet at the airport. We'll get together. We'll take a cab over to the hotel. So I get off the plane in Vancouver, and I'm walking through the airport, and I'm talking on the phone. Hey, Dave, yeah, I see you're over there. And this skinny kid looking like 17 years old is Dave Pagnotta. I'm like, did I make the right choice here? I'm like, Dave? He goes, Dennis? I go, yeah. So I'll tell you, Joe, in the 14 years I've been there, we have not had a crossword. What an amazing partner David is. And we've grown it to now the point where both doing a bad right for this madness board.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see the evolution of the fourth period, because a lot of people that I know here on the East Coast, we've heard of the fourth period. And I remember seeing things on Twitter, on Facebook, even on Instagram, and saying, who is the fourth period? But then you eventually see the blue check marks start to retweet stuff, start to like things, start to refer you guys to certain things. And, and then, you guys become a reliable source. And then that was one of the things where, I was like, okay, this is big time. And you guys now, again, obviously, you've made it where you guys are all on Sirius XM, and you're the co-host of The Hot Stove with Ryan Patton and the aforementioned David Pagnotta. So Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Talk about your time now at Sirius and how that all began.
It began, I think I've always been good at radio, Joe. It goes back to 2000 when ESPN Radio started their network, right? And they had producers, and they were looking for content, and they found one of the producers found my website and found my column. So can you come on and talk hockey with Joe D'Ambrosio, who's actually was the play-by-play guy for the Connecticut Huskies? Yeah. And I knew Joe a little bit, so I went on the air for about 6 to 8 minutes. It's like me and you talking, made a couple of jokes, and the producer comes back on and says, can you come back on tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. What I didn't know, Joe, is that, like, I didn't know much about the radio business, but on weekends, I'm on 150 different markets. So I started getting pings from, like, Cody, Wyoming, Elkhart, Indiana, Vegas, San Jose, and they go, who's this fast-talking guy with a New York accent coming on? I've been an entertainer, Joe. That's what it is. And so that helped me with respect to launching it. And then, to give advice to anybody that wants to, if you're especially a writer, write something every day or every other day, but consistently write. Get your voice, find your voice. So I just kept on going on the radio track. And what happened was the ESPN radio thing got me in touch with a lot of different markets. And then one of my buddies, Mo Khan, who's still on the air at Montreal 690, knew about the fourth period, put me on a late night show, and the night show, and said, yeah, we might want to use this guy during the day. And they told me that they did a study that when I'm on the air on 690 in Montreal, people listen longer for some unknown reason. And that leveraged a lot of different things. And then when SiriusXM started going with the NHL network, we had a fits and start. We had a fourth period radio show. Like you said, Joe, we built a critical mass, right? We got legitimate because our sources were legitimate and people started relying on us. Can you come on and do a weekend show? So Dave and I did a weekend show for probably 5 years at this point in time. It's about relationships, Joe. Like, do I offer, like, look, am I Elliot Friedman or Bob McKenzie or Darren Drager? No, hell no. I'm not like those guys. I bow down to those guys. When Elliot Friedman puts me in 31 Thoughts, I text him to thank him, right? I'm not that guy, right? But we're entertaining, we inform, and we have, whether people believe it or not, we have legitimate sources now at high level. When we get lately on our show, I think it's just, the old school things with journalism. There's not a lot of old school journalism, Joe, but do get two sources, like especially if it's high stuff, and understand you're dealing with people's lives here, right? So I just think we're just authentic, Joe. I mean, we inform, and every day or every Saturday really informs, because now Pete puts me on with Steve Coulias and Mick Kern during the week. We do an hour round table. I've acquiesced to a level where now I'm the chair for the Professional Hockey Writers Association. There's another level of legitimacies. I think if you play the long game, Joe, you're not looking to do hot takes and stuff like that people like you and respect you, and you have to get the respect of the players. Like, so if like with the Austin Matthews situation with his COVID, would I ever report that? No. And I respect Steve Stevens. He's been around for a long time. I would never do that because I'm more concerned about the relationship with the player and the organization. Because there's going to be consequences next season when Steve walks into that room. I'm sure the Leafs really don't appreciate it. I'm sure Austin Matthews may never talk to him again. So you have to be careful with the information. So I think that it's your body of work, Joe. It's as simple as that. It's like when you approach PR directors for access, they want to see a body of work. It's as simple as that. If you don't have it, you have to work to it. And if you got to write for free for a website like I did for a long time, then just do it. And you know what? Everybody's destiny may not be in sports media. It may be a great side passion for you. But I'm living to say that if you have the drive and determination, I want to work at your craft, you can do it. Because, Joe, I have no right classically, you look at my training, to be where I am. I was classically trained as, I'll give you the story I give everybody because I do some lecturing here at Loyola Marymount. I got a C in English, in freshman English. I've never taken a journalism or creative writing course in my life. Should I be the chair of the Professional Hockey Writers Association? No. But I know how to tell a story, Joe. I think that's it. I think if you can find your voice and know how to tell a story, that you can get some I know it's a tough business right now, but once you get through the next 18 months, I think that'll come back on track. But just, if you really love it and have a passion for it, may not be your destiny to do it. Because I did on the ice the last 8 years when they awarded Stanley Cup. I actually drank out of the Stanley Cup. But I'll trade that for anyone. What your experience is very important. I get my recruiting gigs because, Joe, I'll be totally transparent. They're lucrative. And I didn't want to walk freely for the money, but especially the last 6 years, Red Bull loved it. They thought it was great. And because they have the saying, we give wings to people and ideas. So I approached the senior management of the company and said, look, I do this. They go, that's friggin' awesome. Please keep doing it. So I had advocacy because I will tell you, I couldn't do this as a side gig if I worked for Disney or I worked for a law firm or an accounting firm. But I was fortunate enough to find a company like Red Bull that let me kind of grow. The last 6 years has been exponential growth. I was like, okay, if I'm just writing and I get a media credential, that's kind of cool. But now at the level I'm at, where I'm on television and radio, like there's no way. I like to tell you, 20 years ago, there's no way a guy like me with my training should be at that level. But some way, I found a way.
Yeah, it's very, it's an amazing story because, and that's actually a question I was going to ask later towards, the end of the third period of our conversation, but perfect time to segue into it because you have people now that obviously here in New York pause and for, shelter in place where you are and, just quarantine general, where obviously are, in limbo about your future or, you're really not confident with the work that you've put out in sports media. What would be your advice to someone like, I don't know, maybe even myself, why not? But just to keep their head up, because this is the time where there's a lot of also mental issues where, again, you're told to stay inside. You can't do what you want. There's no games to call. There's no games to write about. You can only create so much content. Or can you? What are your thoughts on that? And what would your advice be to a young aspiring writer / media person?
I would become a sponge. I would find everything. If it's hockey, I'll give you an example. The draft. I'd get the 6 draft guides and become an expert and read them cover to cover and become an expert on that. I'd be reading every single thing. When they do the insider training on TSN, I watch that video. I would read so much. I'd go back to teams' media guides, whatever sport it is, and read and read. This is the one time you could do the research without interfering with having to cover games. I would be a sales reader. Everything I get and the expert. I guess there's an old saying: if you read or do something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert. I would just dive into as much content as there is online. Read other writers. Just be aware of it. Listen to sports talk radio because we're still talking sports. But just get as much knowledge as you can because that will be reflected in your writing. Because you'll come across something, like. I'll give you an example, like with the Kings, with their second overall pick, Quentin Byfield, right? So, like, I sat down, I'm looking, well, okay, I love comparables, Joe. Like, who is this guy compared to, right? So, what do I know? I know that Sam Constantino says Malkin. Craig Button says Kopitar. Another guy I heard on radio said a young Eric Staal. So when I write about it or I talk about it, now I can use that. So I think you leverage other people, other more knowledgeable people, and just because you can't right now. But you go back to history, you can go back to a lot of different things, the sport or the particular team you want to cover, and just become an expert by reading. That's the biggest advice I give. First of all, because this is something right. I think a vaccine, will be masked, we'll be smarter about it, we'll get through this, right? So that sports will be coming back, right? People will be in the buildings. This is not the ending for us. So I'm more positive. But I would say read, and then try to write at least keep it or this is an opportunity for someone to find their voice. Like, this is the pause that you could just discover, like, what you're good at, what you're bad at. And I will say this, the way they trained me in Red Bull, play to your strengths, Joe. Don't try to work on your weaknesses because they're going to pay you for your strength. My strength is more entertaining than being an insider or whatever, or writer. But I know that. I understand that. So my writing, my style of writing is entertaining. I use slang. I use nicknames that people don't like sometimes, whatever. I think this is a great opportunity to find, like, who and what you are. So you self-reflect and then also do some research with respect to the sport you cover, become more knowledgeable.
That's true. Yeah. And to go with slang, I love the nickname you actually gave me, Double J. That's fantastic because, exactly. I've never gone by that, but I think we're going to have to put that onto the list and I can give you credit for that. That's fantastic. Thank you. Sure. So now, obviously during coronavirus, we look at some of the pre-March 11th and March 12th, I guess, positive events. Sure. And you were just saying earlier that, you've covered 8 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals. You've seen the cup lifted 8 times in a row. That is absolutely, and let me just rephrase that. you've seen 8 Stanley Cups lifted live in person.
Yes. On the ice.
Right. On the ice. Exactly. That's just remarkable. Admirable. All the above. Now, you look at something like that and you say to yourself, was that ever a thought in my life where I would ever stand on the ice 8 times, not once, not twice, all the way to 8 times, and say to yourself, okay, I'm covering this. I am now a source that, and honestly, and we're really going to put you in that Mount Rushmore of NHL writing. Seriously, no, because you know what? Like, now you were saying it, and we said it earlier. The fourth period is seriously becoming a proven source where we can rely on you guys, on you, on David, on the whole fourth period to release and to break news.
Yeah.
So to have that 8 times, how good does that feel for you, especially because this all happened in the restart of your personal life?
Well, it's even more surreal for me, Joe, because I did it twice in Los Angeles. So this is a team that in 2012, at 45 years, had never, and I work with this. It's not just the players who I've been close with, but it's also the staff I've worked with. And guys like Jim Fox, who every time he visited the school, he had to explain why the Kings never won a Stanley Cup, when you had other teams like the Dodgers and, winning championships and stuff like that. So to see that affirmation for the people behind the scenes was great. It's more surreal, Joe, because I'm on the ice with friends. I'm getting hugs from the players. I'm looking in stands, and I'm a season ticket holder. So I'm looking in stands, and my wife is there watching me and waving, and I'm on the ice with the Kings that I've covered for 20 years. It doesn't get any better than that. It's just ridiculous. I mean, like, my life could have ended right there, Joe, other than maybe getting invited to Dustin Brown's party in 2014. But it's the culmination of everything. You look around, and when these things happen, Joe, like, you have to embrace the moment, because they are fleeting moments. They're great memories. I have stuff on my wall here. You can see a lot of memories because I'm somewhat sentimental. But to experience that in your new hometown where you restarted your life with my second wife, who's amazing, looking in the stands, and she's there and she's in tears, and my stepson's there, and I'm on the ice, and people waving, hey, that's Dennis. Hey, look, he's on the ice. It's crazy, Joe. It's like you got to pinch yourself. And it's okay to pinch yourself because, I know the old school, like, you don't want to get close to the players, and all the lines are blurred now, Joe. It's like, who knows, like, how you're supposed to act or what you're supposed to do. So when I was invited to a party for the Stanley Cup, was I going? Yeah. Do I play favorites? Yeah. Do I have biases? Sure. But people want to know my biases, and I'm transparent about it. Like, would I write a column criticizing Kopitar or Brown? I better have a really, really good reason to do. But, we all play favorites, Joe. It's not fair. We don't have to be so totally down the middle on everything where we have to extract ourselves. We can play favorites. It's what people play. When you see Smith and Max Kellerman, they play favorites, right? It's about that. It's 2020 is a very different cat than when I started out 20 years ago, where there were certain rules. Like, well, there's one rule: you still can't cheer in the press box, right, when you score a goal, for the home team. But other than that, it's surreal, Joe. It's like, that's the culmination. Like, wow, you look around, and especially because of hockey, because that's where you need so much, right? I mean, and you see players, and you see top of the cup. I mean, these guys play long and hard. They play a 9-month, they basically 9 months to win a Stanley Cup. So to see that in Los Angeles was great. But to see, when you're on the ice with Ovechkin, and he finally gets over the hump, and he lives the hump, even though it was in Vegas, it's great. It's great to see it mostly in home. But I think the Kings are the only home teams that have actually won it. I was actually when Chicago won in 2013, but most of the teams have won on the road. Like last year in Boston, it was St. Louis. So it's kind of a muted celebration, but it's a lot of fun. And it's just a great way to end our season, because this trophy is so amazing. It's a personality of itself.
And to be on home ice when the Los Angeles Kings took down let's call them your hometown New York Rangers in 2014. And then also in 2012, obviously in 6 against the Devils.
Yeah.
To be able to cover let's call it your new hometown team against your former life, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Was there some other feelings that you had there? Because, you think to yourself, well, I had season tickets for the Devils many years ago, and the Rangers were so close to the Bronx, obviously. Yep. So, this was the team. These were the two teams that you were around all of your life. And now it's almost like everything comes full circle. Talk about that feeling in 12 and 14.
Yeah, well, I'll connect the dots for you, Joe. So growing up, I was a Ranger fan. Ranger and New York fan, right? And so, but then every year I got tired of them losing in the final and choking, and I got rid of it. And so then when I was 13 years old, I moved to Central Jersey, and this team on a UHF Channel 29 with orange, white, and black, and they fought every night, was on winning games. I became a Flyers fan during the Cup years. That's how old I am. And then in the 80s, got married the first time, tried to start a family, got away from hockey. And then moved back to North Jersey in around 95. And I lived in the same building as a lot of the players. So I knew Martin Brodeur. I knew Mike Peluso. I knew a lot of the guys because I wound up hanging out with some at one of their, joint. So I knew. So the night the Kings are winning the Cup against the Devils, I knew Marty. I saw him after the game. I'm like, hey, sorry, dude. But so that was really surreal. The Ranger stuff, look, anytime it's New York versus LA, I think it's a win for sports. So I think that was a lot of fun. And no joke, that was a 5-game series. That was double overtime games. Like the last game was amazing, jazz hands, Alec Martinez. So I think it's just there are no accidents. I think that the Kings won, who I was a season ticket holder for, and the Rangers, who I grew up rooting initially for. I think that was meant to be. And they were a great series, but I guess if you hang on this game long enough and you're a good enough and authentic enough person, you get to know a lot of people. So you can shake Marty Brodeur's hand at the end and say, "Hey, man, that was tough." And I still know Marty to this day. I'm glad he's back with the Devils right now. But it was just, I think it was the teams for the teams.
Yeah. Now let's move forward, or actually move backwards, if you will, because we were talking earlier about you being the chair of the professional, the PHWA, Professional Hockey Writers Association, and of the Los Angeles chapter, that is, or is it the LA chapter, or is it the whole thing?
It's the LA chapter. I'm the
LA
chair
chapter,
of the LA
right?
chapter.
Yeah.
Right.
So, with that being said, again, since 2018, talk about what goes into that. Is there a dinner involved? How is that for you? Obviously, for the last 2 years, you've been the chair, but obviously being the at the helm of this chapter, there's got to be a lot of work involved.
There's some work involved. It doesn't take up a lot of my time. First of all, it's a relationship. I am the representative with respect to contacting the PR people if we think that there's lack of access or something like that. But the Kings, last couple of years with Rob Koch and John Gomez, they've been great with respect to access. Look, Jeff Carter's never going to talk to the media, but maybe two or three times a year. So procedural stuff like that we want to make sure we get fair access. Because now, obviously, every team now has an embedded reporter. At the LA Kings Insider here, we want to make sure that we get equal access. With respect to the awards, I'm the one that organizes the vote for the Masterton trophy for our chapter. So I have to send out those votes. I also have some influence with respect to who actually votes for the awards. And we have a unusual circumstance in LA because LA Times is probably the only paper probably remaining that doesn't allow their writers to vote for the awards because they believe it might financially remunerate these players if they have contract bonuses. So a Hall of Famer like Helene Elliott can't, because of what her paper says, she can't vote for the awards. Jack Harris, who just started with us in LA, couldn't vote this year. So, got great people like Lisa Dillman and Josh Cooper from The Athletic can vote. But it's more like a procedural thing, and I'm the point of contact. If the Kings go to the Stanley Cup Final, I'd be certainly a point person. But we have two guys, I think, Rob Rossi and I forget the other guy in Minnesota, that are the chapter, like the head chapter chairs for the West, Mike Russo in Minnesota. So I'm just all the procedural guy. If somebody has a complaint with respect to access, one of our members, that I need to have that relationship with the PR directors. Plus I had, because as you've mentioned, I've been in LA for 20 years. So it was the kind of situation where we had transition as the chair, and it was a little bit of disorganization. And then one person stepped off and wasn't really doing writing anymore. So I basically went to Mark Spector, who's the president at the time. I said, look, there's a little bit of disorganization here, and I'm going to be able to step up and do it. And he was really transparent. He says, we usually have somebody from the Associated Press or the Times Media chapter chair. He says, but you've been there a long time. So, we'll be happy that we're glad that you raised your hand. So that's where it is. So there's no dinner involved, Joe. There's no meetings. I do, make sure everybody pays their dues. I give our badges at these. And so it's more like it's a procedural type of thing, but it's kind of a nice little accomplishment to put on the resume as well. And plus, it gets to help out our great organization. Inroads, maybe put some, the NHL.com voters on voting for the awards. I think to me, the biggest takeaway is I am part of history now. Right, I do get to vote for the Hart Trophy and the Calder. In 2014, I was lucky enough to vote for the Conn Smythe, and I did vote for Justin Williams. So when you go to and you see those awards sitting there and saying, wow, I got, we were in Ottawa a couple of years ago, got really emotional. I don't know why. I was standing with my wife. I'm like, I'm part of that. I'd make a determination of who was. I'm part of hockey history. That's overwhelming. And again, it goes back to my roots. Maybe it's the imposter syndrome of thinking I really shouldn't be here. But it just to know that you're part of history, to do that, I think that's it. And plus, the PHWA is invitation only. Like, we make a determination like I did 2 years ago. I said, we need to bring some people in. I have some guy like Brian Kennedy here who's written 6 books on hockey. There are people who need to be in the chapter that weren't. So guess what, Joe? I recruited people. Imagine that, me recruiting people. I recruited people into the chapter. I just streamlined everything, got everybody back on the same page. And I'm a pretty organized cat. So it's worked out really nice. So it's just nice. Again, and my entry into the PHWA, I think, was in 2008. And it was Helene Elliott who emailed me. And I'm like going, and I looked at my phone like 3 times. I'm like, this can't be true. I said, Helene said, I'd like to invite you in. And this is a woman, one of the first women in a hockey locker room. Jacket from the Hall of Fame from the Elma Ferguson Award. Like, what an honor. Like, of course. I ran upstairs. I was actually sitting in my seats that night. I ran upstairs and like, yes, absolutely. So it's a nice little designation. Is it a club? Yeah. But, I got into it, and now I cherish it. And I think it's just a really nice, like I said, I think to me, the salient point for me is be able to vote for the awards and be part of hockey history. I think is just really, really a real affirmation about my career.
Yeah. And again, life comes full circle. You're recruiting guys, as you were saying just earlier, but then also, when you get the text message or you get the message or the email or whatever you had gotten there, you almost you become like a little kid, where like, wow, this is really happening. You get so ecstatic.
Oh yeah. I was overwhelmed. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, holy cow. Because and then, again, 2008 fourth period is like in that, like, twilight zone. Are we legit? Are we not legit? People saying, you're full of crap on Twitter, or even when Twitter was around. So to have somebody like that sees you, because it's Helene's very, very brilliant woman. I mean, and she saw how I operate. She saw the nature of the questions. Like, I'm not a beat writer, right? So I understood the protocol too. Like, you're on a beat, you're on a deadline, ask the question first. I'll wait for the second wave and then go in and ask the questions. She saw I operated. I was out of respect. I really didn't ask bad questions. She saw I think that's the most important thing. How you conduct yourself in the locker room is important, because everybody's watching, Joe. Like, they see everything. The PR people are watching everything, and some are looking for an excuse to say, no, you can't come in, or you can't have access. So it's how you conduct yourself. And you could be the off-the-wall guy, but it's not to get that one fleeting moment where you get a gotcha question, it's not going to help you. Like, just be straight up, be transparent, ask the tough questions when you have to, but be prepared for a tough answer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, because you obviously have New York blood in you, do you get the, do you get the feeling when you go into the Kings locker room, like, are you New York media, where, obviously everyone out here, they're all hounds, obviously, and they almost attack you for literally everything, whether it be any question, Sam Darnold having mono, or during the coronavirus, obviously, where we were at Madison Square Garden, Big East tournament was canceled, and the whole media, every media outlet that you could think of was in the press conference room. I was gracious enough to be there. And I remember I was going to ask a question. I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to let you guys do it, because this is just, you guys are attacking like hawks. Do you ever get that feeling from some of the Los Angeles-based writers? Obviously, again, you have New York blood in you. So does it come naturally to you that, again, you're not a typical beat writer or a typical story? Yeah. What is your thoughts there, or the thoughts of other of your peers, if you will?
I'm not looking for the headline, Joe. I'm not chasing. I don't have to be first in. I don't have to. I'm not doing that because, Joe, I look at big picture. I'm looking at relationships. Is this question going to harm my relationship with a player, with the PR department, with the executive suite, whatever, right? Look, sometimes I can give people heads up, right? And I'll be totally transparent. When I was all over the Todd McLuhan hire, I had the information right every time. I was first ahead of everyone, right? I didn't get the Kings a heads up, right? But when I learned some stuff at the end of the season, this season, I gave them a heads up. I got to look at the big picture, Joe, because if you screw your relationships, you're dead. If you lose your integrity, you're done. I don't care. I could be the greatest writer in the world, and I have no integrity, and he's a bad guy, or he opens his mouth, or he betrays trust, you're done, especially with the players, Joe. And so when I talk to my guys about it, like, can I use this? Yes or no? And what I do, Joe, and for any fledgling reporter that does that can't use a player's information or a quote or feelings or ideas, use them as your own. Like, okay, so this player thinks this way about this guy. Like, oh, he's kind of lazy. I can write, well, I think he's lazy. So that's how you start. Look, I'm not going to say that this guy is bad or lazy or whatever. I'm going to say it, right? So I always look at the big picture. There are consequences for everything, Joe. And you can't just I'm not that big. I'm not that good that I can go ruin a relationship and I can't get it back, Joe. People they're not that forgiving. They remember, they got long. And now, Joe, here's the thing. It's a locker room. You think these guys don't talk? Yeah. And so when Kopitar Brown said to a rookie, says, oh, that guy Dennis with the blonde hair and the New York accent, he's fine, he's cool, no problem. And we have that. That's what it's about, because it's a chain. It's an information chain, Joe. And you got the leaders in the room that don't like you, you're going to have a lot of trouble covering that team or that sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I haven't made it to the professional level yet to go into a professional locker room, but I know in the college locker room, it's obviously completely different. They're all, amateur players, and, they're not the pros where they've really experienced, full-fledged media just yet. So I'm actually going to take that advice. That's pretty good. Thank you, Dennis. And to everyone else listening too, for those, that is a serious tidbit of advice to learn from and to live by, for sure, any aspiring journalists. So let's look at the LA Kings a little bit. Got to ask you a couple of questions here. So now, obviously, after the Stanley Cup runs, 2012, 2014, we saw a few playoff appearances after, but unfortunately, the last couple of years have been, start to sell. The prime has been, they weren't in their prime anymore. The Stanley Cup window was pretty much over. And now you are covering a team that is in a rebuilding mode. Now, especially because you got to see two cups in 2 years or 3 years, if you will, 2012 and 2014. How is it difficult for you to cover a losing team, I guess now, if you will, because at one point they did win. Did you feel a little spoiled when they won in 12 and 14, and then now they're not going to be coming back into the return to play format?
Double J, I don't think anybody can ever feel spoiled covering a team that's coached by Daryl Sutter. And as tough as he was, his ego got bigger when he won those cups. And if you remember that line, fly by 11, that was my question. That was me.
Was that really you?
That was me. Yeah. Why did you say to your team after the game, fly at 11? That was me. So.
Oh my God.
We've had our fits and starts with Daryl. I don't think Daryl appreciated my relationship with the players. So it was I never thought it was a walk in the park, right? Covering the team during that time. And the funny thing about Daryl, Joe, is that when the microphones went down, he was a great guy. He was just the son of a bitch when the microphones were on. Gave you a hard time. If you were American, I think there was some xenophobic stuff going on. any Canadian reporter that walked in was welcome with open arms. But us guys on the beat that grew up in New York or LA, it's always like we were second-class citizens for Darryl. I'm not really sure. So I never felt like it was a gift to be able to come. Now, I will say this. It's a gift now to cover this team because of Todd McLuhan. He is amazing. I'm a huge Todd McLuhan fan. And talk about nicknames, I call him the Todd Father. I think he's fantastic. He's just great. So covering the losing team, I'll tell you when it was tough, Joe. Last year, when he fired John Stevens, who probably, if you look at Rob Blake's body of work, if he had any misgivings, he probably, when he took over, would have wiped the slate clean, got rid of Darryl, got rid of John Stevens, and started fresh. He tried John Stevens. John Stevens really solid. He's not a head coach. He just doesn't have the personality for it. So, but when he dismissed John that early in the season, I think it was 13 games, and he put in Willie Desjardins, who was absolutely rejected and not respected by these players because of his methods. He was putting in peewee drills, some of the guys were saying. So to watch that team play and how disengaged they were, like Joe, a couple of nights I sat ice level because our seats are in the lower bowl. 2-0 after 5 minutes against Toronto, the game was over. I'm not saying they quit, but you knew the game was over, right? So last year was very, very difficult. And I had guys texting me after every game, 12 games left, 11 games left, 10 games left. They wanted that season to end quickly. But I will say this, third time they got the coach right. So to cover them in a losing – look, you can have a losing effort, but the way Todd addressed the media, because he always says to us, you guys have a job to do. So he's been respectful. Once in a while, I'll give you a tough answer. He doesn't appreciate the question. But, he kind of, by the end of the season, we had built the relationship. So it was much easier, to cover it with this coach because he was so fantastic. And so he's like Jurgen Klopp for Liverpool. He's that type of guy. He communicates. Yeah. He has 2 20-something kids at home, which really, really helps because he can identify with the younger players. But just so, his answers are so eloquent and to the point and direct. This is every question direct, but I'd say 95% of them, he gives you a legitimate answer. And he understands, he respects the job that we do because we know what that will help. He knows me, my buddy John Hoover, who's my partner on Kings of the Podcast, we have relationships with the players. So he gets that. He understands it's a business. And this is a business. It's not just a game. So that and the fact that the team started playing better at the end of last season, they finished with a 7-game winning streak. So the two things Rob's done really well is he got the coach right, and he's left his amateur scouting department alone. Mark Yannetti is one of the smartest guys. And you look at what they've drafted over the last 3 years, the treasure trove of prospects they have, and now they're going to get the 2nd overall pick. So last season was a difficult season because nobody wanted to talk after games. The games were not entertaining. They weren't even matches. Some nights, it's 5-0 in the second period. Why do you cover? And you got the coach going up there, Desjardins up there saying, well, I thought we had a chance to win. I'm like, what game were you watching? It was 7-1 in the second against Colorado. Yeah. And his guy's coaching for a job, but Willie's back in juniors, probably in the right place where he should have been. So yes, it's difficult, and that's it for aspiring writers. It's hard to find a story. You know what? Unless you're a beat writer, you may not want to be in a room every day because there's nothing to talk about. You know what the stuff to talk about? 2 weeks from the trade deadline, who's going? Are you, do you want to be traded? How do you feel about that? But, when a team is in last place and it's the middle of January and they're playing, the Florida Panthers and there's 12,000 people in the building, it's a difficult job. And for people out there that want to do this, it is not the most glamorous job in the world. Mm-hmm. Maybe it looks from the outside like it is, but there are some tough nights where you walk in and they give you the sixth, the third pair defenseman or fourth liner, and that's who they want to talk. None of the stars want to come out because they're done it over. That's when it becomes hard. So you will grasp at straws some nights. So are you going to have writing blocks sometime covering a team if it's on the beat, especially if they're bad? Yeah, you're going to be tested because you're going to have to find something entertaining, to a fresh face and haven't lost. But to talk to a guy like Kopitar or Brown or Daddy who have won cups, very difficult year for them. They're not used to that. So it was a challenge, I think, but sometimes you probably do your best work because, Joe, when you're winning Stanley Cups, it's easy to find stories. It's easy to talk to the players. It's easy to talk to their parents. It's easy to talk to bodies. When you're a 67-point team, imagine covering the Detroit Red Wings this year. What do you find there? And you can't be negative all the time. So it was more challenging last season than this. But I see this team now. They bottomed out last season, and I think quickly because of the great drafting they've done, and they're going to have a lot of salary cap space in the next couple of years. I think they're on the rise. So by the time we get to the 21-22 season, I think you'll see a playoff contender again in Los Angeles.
Well, that's definitely a bold statement. And you know what you actually had said about, imagine with the, writing for the Detroit Red Wings. Well, I will say this here, and we can actually relate on Long Island because after just before a couple of years ago, obviously, we had Islanders had a couple of good seasons, but then you had that 10-year stretch of just pure losing. So you can only imagine how these beat writers over here felt 10 consecutive years of just terrible, just losing and disastrous that obviously you know all about out here.
I know, Joe, back in the day, I actually covered games at the Nassau Coliseum.
Did you?
Yeah, I sat behind, Howie Rose and Eddie Westfall and banged my head on the pipe over the press box, the worst press box ever. So that's where I really cut my teeth, to be honest with you. So I did a little bit of media coverage. They were nice enough to give me a credential, actually. So I would sit behind, and that's one thing. That's how you learn. Yeah. Like to sit behind Howie. And he didn't even know me, but to sit there and watch how we go around and craft the notes and everything, there's little cues you can pick up from that. So if you do get access to these people, make sure you're really paying close attention, because that was, even though the games were okay, they weren't that great, and the traffic to get out to Uniondale wasn't the greatest. Like I learned my early lessons at Nassau Coliseum, so I'll never forget that place.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah. Well, now it's probably closed indefinitely. So it's absolutely crazy, man. But now we were bringing up obviously about where you had brought up about, the difficulties of coming up with content, especially during losing seasons. And whenever there are winning seasons, especially Stanley Cup seasons, the content and producing content and creative content becomes that much easier. Now with COVID being around and there's no hockey at all, right. Your team is not going to come back to the return to play. We'll start with this. When you got the phone call March 11th, March 12th in that range, that the NHL season is suspended, what was going through your mind?
It was just a fait accompli. Like I was at the last couple of games in LA. The last game was against Ottawa. Like you knew this was the last game of the season. You saw the storm coming. The waves were coming in big, and you're like, this is it. There's no way to do it. So I was not surprised because I'd seen the last couple of games. It was weird. Peterson walks in with gloves to the podium. And then the next game, the final game, there's a rope 6 feet away from the podium. So we're sitting on chairs behind a rope asking Todd questions. And we weren't allowed at locker room access. So I'm going, well, this is only going one way. So it was difficult. And played some regular season games and finished it. But, I'll be honest with you. When the guys split up where they were in the standings, they had like Drew Doughty. We did a conference call with Drew. He was holy shit. Doughty would have came back. He would have said, I'm out, guys. Peace out, bro. Like he would not have come back. So I just think it was just like you saw this coming. I think it goes back to the Utah Jazz with Rudy Gobert. Once that happened, I'm going it's not going in a direction that's going to be good for all sports. So it was not shocking. It was not surprising. And I'm just grateful, hopefully, that by the time they will be skating in Toronto and Edmonton. But it was not a shock to me because of the last couple of days that I had been in that building. I'm going, okay, this is the last time I'm probably going to be in the building for the season. And the one challenge is now, Joe, when you look at next season, free agency is going to start on November 1st. So what does that tell you? It tells you, the Winter Classic might be the opener next season. So you got a situation here in Los Angeles where it might be 9 months till they play another game. So I got to think that the league is going to do something like the NFL, like OTAs, where they're going to be able to assemble a team maybe in August or September and do a little bit of training, because to be not assembled as an organization for 9 months is just really not fair, considering these other 24 teams are playing as well. But yeah, go back to those days. You just felt it coming. You're thinking, okay, this is something that's really serious that we are not going to be able to control.
Yeah, the writing was all over the wall. The weirdest thing, especially to be in a building You being in the Staples Center, I was at Madison Square Garden. The weirdest thing to basically have to hold a microphone, all the way out to here.
Yeah.
And, if you wanted to talk to that person, that was the only way that they gave you access. And it was way outside the locker room in an alternate location, next to the court. The weirdest thing. Now you said, with obviously the 9 months and, with OTAs possibly, and, with the writing being on the wall and the media having no locker room access at the time, having a rope 6 feet away, or, you sitting in chairs way far back and talking to Todd McLuhan. Now you think to yourself, Dennis, well, now next year, what will the new normal look like for you in Los Angeles and all over the National Hockey League?
Yeah, well, the conspiracy theorists say this is a way to get the media out of the locker room.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. Look, again, I'm not a beat writer. Even the PR people joke with me, like, Dennis, if you want to know something from the players, you're going to text them anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, look, if you want to, now, it may revert to something like the Stanley Cup Final, where they bring out 2 players from the winning team and the losing and winning coach. They want to do it that way. That's great. Will we complain as a PHW as a group? Probably. We shouldn't be going backwards on this. I think at some point in time, the health and safety of the players will not be a question anymore. And that will be flags. To start next season, we'll see. Look, I plan to go to Edmonton to cover the qualifying round. Like, am I going to be, at ice level? No. I think the experience is going to be probably virtual, even if I'm in the building. I'm not going to be able to get to the event floor and talk to players. But those are
going to be something like this, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the sacrifices you're going to have to make. And we're all comfortable with Zoom meetings now. So that's just I've done probably half a dozen Zoom meetings with respect to Kings prospects and management and things of that nature. So we're much more comfortable in this medium, because you have to be fair. That's the one thing is that, to go for a team, I don't know, from the Islanders, right? To go to Toronto, you got to have the 14-day quarantine. And then there's, the playing round. You got to be up there 3 weeks. What media organization is going to put up somebody in a hotel for 3 weeks to cover 5 games? That's another issue. It's another question you have to ask. So will this become a virtual experience with respect to media? Maybe in the short term for next season, and we're still not out of this situation with COVID. I don't see any harm in getting media back in the locker room. But we got to be smart. We have to understand where we are at that point in time. And even as the chair of the PHWA in Los Angeles, I want full access. But again, if there are health and safety conditions that are still in place that the league is not comfortable with, we're going to have to acquiesce to that, which will be probably in the short term. So, but do I think this is the end of media in the locker room? No, I don't think so. I think that, and not every team wants to prevent the media from being in the locker room. I just think that the NHL is still a lot old school in a lot of ways, and like in Toronto, they have 20 people in the room. The good thing about LA, some nights it's 5 or 6 people, so it's not really that much of an intrusion. In the bigger markets, I get it, I understand it, but I don't think we're at the end of media in the locker room. I just think that I would be careful with respect to what's going to happen next season early on, that we shouldn't jump to conclusions.
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair. And for those history buffs out there, that know about the last time that we had a full-fledged pandemic, it was about 700 days with the Spanish flu back in 1918, 1919. So we really hope that, that number, especially because I think we're over 100 days now, we hope that 700 we never hear that in the same sentence as COVID. Now going back to a little more positive things, Dennis, and are you okay on time? I just want to ask.
Yeah, I'm good, John.
All right, cool. Excellent. Good. As we're approaching a couple of minutes until 11 o'clock here on the East Coast and 8 o'clock where Dennis is in the greater Los Angeles area, we thank you for staying with us here on this primetime edition of the Primetime Rundown. So back to the positive side of things. Now, experiences of a lifetime. We continue with that. Because there have been almost every single National Hockey League event that has gone on in the last few years that you have attended. You've attended the draft. You've attended Stadium Series contests. And on top of it, you've also attended the Global Series in Stockholm and in Finland in 2018. Now, obviously, between the regular season, the playoffs, the Stanley Cup Final, which I'm not even going to ask you because that's too easy of a question. Well, what is the best between all the things I mentioned? We know the Stanley Cup Final is, but with taking the Cup final out of the equation, how much fun, not only fun, did you have covering hockey overseas, but also being able to cover the Kings in the Stadium Series twice?
Yeah, well, the one at Dodger Stadium, JJ, was amazing, right? I mean, a sold out 56,000 people and a good representation from Duck fans. They drove up from Orange County. KISS was the entertainment. I mean, come on. That doesn't. They're playing volleyball, beach volleyball on the side of the ring. It wasn't a great viewing angle. But Joe, here's the thing. Like, I've been to Winter Classics. I was the one at Fenway Park, right? So I'll give you the one I usually always go back to. It's not even Kingsville. It's Fenway Park. Like the day before, because we're media, we got a tour, private tour of Fenway Park, right? And I'm a Yankee fan, and there's a guy, an old guy in his probably 60s as an employee, taking us around, and he takes us down to the field, and he lets us go inside the Green Monster. And you see all the writing for all the players that were in there. I'm going, I'm taking pictures left and right. And then the next day, opening the we're walking around the stadium. It's just about to be the face-off, and the B-1 bomber flies over, the stealth bomber. And my wife was actually with me. I turned to her and go, I'm done. I don't even have to see the game. I was inside the Green Monster, B-1 bomber flew over. I'm done. I don't need anything more. So that's it. I think with respect to going overseas, the great thing about the games in Europe is that you get people from all over the continent visiting. So you see, but if you're a jersey geek and you want to see sweaters from all different teams, that's where you go. It's amazing. Games are sold out. I think my best experience was the first one in 2010. We went over with, we were lucky enough when Columbus played San Jose, we had a relationship with Columbus. We actually got to fly in their charter. So we went to the last preseason game of the year. We drove to this private airport. It's basically an office building. No TSA. We got wanded. The players were there in tracksuits. We get on a 737. They hand us an entertainment center thing, and back in 2010, food, and we flew with the team. We land in Stockholm. I don't know where, in the middle of an airfield. They go, give us your passports. We go give them the passports. They stamp them, and we never saw an airport. We drove right to the hotels in Stockholm. So I think the first experience about being in Stockholm, an international game with NHL players. We did a couple of photo shoots for a magazine there, and the women are decent looking too, Joe. I won't lie about that. But I think that to be able to travel on a team charter to Sweden with that team was great, because I hung out with the broadcasters, Bob McElliott and a couple of the other guys. So we became really tight with them. So I think that and George Matthews was a great guy for their radio guy. So I think that's the most memorable one. But it is a lot of fun because, again, you get such a continental feel at these games. Like if they had played in Prague next year, we would have went there too, because you see how much first of all, the hunger for NHL in Europe is forever growing. They can't get enough of it. I think they sold in Finland, when we went to Finland, they sold out in like 30 minutes. And I asked one of the people I worked there, when Joker plays, how many people they get in the building? It's about a 13,000 seat building. They go about 6,000 a game. They sold out 13,000 seats for 2 nights in 30 minutes. So the NHL, look, people want to say, but they're on brand with respect to that. They bring over the right players. I think Ottawa had, or Colorado had 6. Some team had 6 Swedes on the team. Last year, it was all about Victor Hedman. Yeah. Like he was the central focus of everything. And it's great to see these guys come home to their home country and play in NHL games. They're not too meaningful because they're usually played in the early of the season. But to me, I think if you can afford it and it's not inexpensive, you can get over and see NHL, hockey in a setting in Europe. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and especially you get to learn new cultures of different countries in Europe or in Asia, wherever it may be. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there were a couple of preseason National Hockey League games. Was it for the Kings or the Sharks that played in China, I believe?
Yeah. The China series. Yeah, the Kings. I did not go over to Beijing. I've been to Beijing before. Did not go to Beijing because those are preseason games. I'm not really going to fly 13 hours from LA and stay in Beijing for preseason games. So they play regular season games. Maybe I'll think about it. And they went to Shanghai and Hong Kong. That's the one places I would have liked to go. But I've been to Beijing before. So I think that experience, it's so different over there. See, at least when you go to Europe, you got a fan base that knows this game and knows it really well and roots actually for both teams, because there's usually, when it was in Finland, it was, I think Barkov was on one side. I forget the Finnish player on the other side. It was Patrick Laine. So it was Barkov, it was Winnipeg and Florida. And normally you would think, who cares about Winnipeg or Florida and Helsinki? But Barkov and Laine, they were the central stories. So I think it was fantastic. So I think it's a little bit different because there's an appreciation for this game. They know the rules. They know the game. So my preference would be much stronger to go to Europe because everybody knows the game over there and they will travel to watch these games. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an experience of a lifetime, as we've heard, not only on commercials, on Sansine and on banners on the on NHL.com, but just generally, if you have that itch to go overseas to see a hockey game, which honestly I do when all of this is done, definitely something that all should do. So now let's again rewind, as we've continued to do that. And if you're a basketball fan, which I've seen on all your social media feeds, you're a big sports guy. So I'm assuming you watched The Last Dance. So we've gone from, 98 back to, 1984 for a quick second, but here, we'll go back to what we were talking about earlier with your podcast and with John Hoven. So, another PHWA writer, Kings of the Podcast, that is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Talk about that and how you got involved there.
It was an offshoot of another project that I developed called Kings of the Round Table. These two guys had a website. I forget the name. I'm blanking out right now. Kingscast. And so at the end of every season, Chris and Keith Korneluk and Chris Kalazewski would bring together the local media and do a roundtable. Really well done, professionally done, 2-camera shoot. It was really a lot of fun. And then Kings won the cup. They went on with their lives and they decided not to do it. I'm like, let's pick this up. So for 2 seasons, we did Kings of the Roundtable. So myself, John, a couple other local writers, and one or two, like Earl Skakel, who's a comedian, Brian Slagle, who's a huge heavy metal. He's the godfather of heavy metal, but a huge hockey fan. So we just didn't want writers. So we wanted the most entertaining writers, but we also wanted to inject a little bit of humor, a little bit of culture. So we did that for a couple of seasons. What I found, JJ, is that at the end of the second, when we did the second one, like 13 games into the season, John Stevens got fired. So everything kind of changed. So the whole dynamic changed. So it wasn't evergreen, right? There wasn't a lot of staying power for that content. And we broke it up into, I think, six 10-minute episodes or something like that. I just said, I needed something that would have more legs. And everybody's doing podcasting. And I'm like, I don't know what podcasting is. So, but, John and I, we're kind of brothers from a different mother, but we have very different points of view with respect to, I'm saying this could work. So I bought some podcasting equipment, got a great, after 6 episodes, I found the right microphone, but we found that we had a voice and we were very, very popular. What we wanted, and it goes back to the, I always try to say that it's an independent voice. And it's not just the Kings, but a lot of these teams now have an embedded writer and they're the insider and they think that there are other views, there are other points of view, there's other sources. So we always wanted to have, and it's basically, an unfiltered look at the team, because we can criticize. We can say Rob or Luke aren't doing the right things or anything, because that's what fans want. I get it. Like the in-bed reporter is going to get some information and be, kind of the bellwether for the team, but you want that unfiltered content. You want strong opinions, especially when things aren't going right. So John and I just sat down and decided to do this podcast. And I know out of the box, we had thousands of listeners, and I was stunned and looking for a couple hundred out of the box maybe. And it just blew up because there wasn't a lot of Kings content outside of what the team provided. There really wasn't any podcast. And we just are opinionated. And I'll tell you this, nobody knows more about Kings prospects than John Hoven, right? And his sources are as deep as mine. So the combination of us two, if you want a full understanding of what's going on with the Kings organization, you can't get any better than us. And it's a little bit of bragging, maybe a patting on the back here, but it just works. And the chemistry between us, because we know each other for so long. I mean, he makes fun. I'm not a beer drinker. I just like, mixed drinks, and he calls them umbrella drinks. I like, red vines. He likes Twizzle. I like Twizzles. He likes red vines. So it's a little bit of culture, but we usually do about an hour. And I'll just, we've had some really good guys. We had Nelson Emerson on, who's their director of player personnel. So I know the Kings understand what our audience is, and it's a substantial audience in Los Angeles for hockey. So it just works because, again, it's relationships. Like, I couldn't do this with anybody else in Los Angeles. It's only me and it's only John. It's the only way we could do it. That's the only person that I trust enough, who's knowledgeable enough, who's entertaining enough to do it. And the vehicles really work for us. It's worked for us, and even through this, it's funny. We're number one right now in Slovenia for Apple Podcasts. I wonder why that is, because obviously Kopitar's on the team. So, but the numbers have been just fantastic. Yeah. I mean, there is, and not just the numbers, but you get the affirmation on. Look, we have our fans, we have our detractors. Some guys think that we're still full of crap and we're frauds, and they can figure that out. But when John comes through and says they're going to draft this guy, and they wind up drafting, and he writes a full series on the prospects, top 15 prospects, honorable mentions. He talks to more people, and I can't touch that. When it comes to prospects, John's the guy. So it just works because of his sources, and our sources aren't the same either. So we can build on each other. And that's where, opinions disagree, because he'll talk to somebody about something. They'll say A. I'll talk to my source. It'll be B. And we have a disagreement, but it's always a friendly disagreement. And he tries to get over on me all the time. But it's a lot of fun. And I think it comes out. I think the passion comes out in what I do just in general. But me and John, there's just like automatic chemistry. Like we kind of know where each other's going. But I'll tell you that it's not a situation, J, where we sit down and we just go on by the seat of our pants. When John, I'm probably going to do another recording next week. When John comes in, he's got 3 pages of notes of stuff he wants to go over. So there is preparation. It's not just sit and talk off the head and just try to think about some hot takes. There is a significant amount of preparation involved. When I do my radio show, I got to do at least an hour and a half of research during the week about what we want to talk about, what audio clips are good. I produce the beginning. So this is not just a situation where you sit down and you open the mic and you start talking. You don't have that much knowledge. You can't keep it all in your head. So the preparation to do all these projects, especially the audio stuff, the radio and the podcast, you have to be prepped. You have to know. You have to have a plan. And the good thing about John, he came with this idea of doing 3 periods, first, second, and third. The second's usually the guest. We open talking about recent stuff. The third period, we might talk about prospects and stuff like that. So the vehicle that we deliver to people is usually about 60 minutes. And now there's a cadence to it. They know what to expect, right? An intro, a guest, and then a close. So it's work. It's a labor of love. I think it's great. But I think it's something where we both found our voice, because we didn't know at the beginning. We didn't know we were going to do this. It could have been Double J where we did like 3 episodes and that was it. But we've done 20 something, and I assume we do it again next season. And we'll probably do 1 or 2 in the off season. The one unfortunate thing is, because they're not in the playoffs, it's going to be 9 months between games. So how do you keep an audience? How do you create content for that? And you mentioned that earlier in the interview. How are we going to create content over 9 months? We'll probably get another bite at the apple, around draft time. But, we're going to have to go deep into it. And could we talk about the playoffs in general? We could, but Kings fans don't care about that right now too much. And I have my, my outlet on Sirius XM where I could do it and talk about the players right now. So it might be in the good affirmation, Joe, to just wrap up with Kings of the podcast is that you get like people on Twitter saying, we need another podcast. When are you guys going to do another podcast? We're starving for content. So I think the affirmation is not only in the numbers, but what you hear on social media as well.
Oh yeah. And especially with social media, obviously now with everything that's going on, obviously you want to stay off. And we've heard from San Jose Sharks play-by-play man, Randy Hahn. He's also said there are times when, just stay off of social media because, you want to see certain things in order to create content, but then you also just want to stay off of it because it's so negative on there right now. But especially now, as you said, to try and create content and to see what the listeners want or the fans want. And especially in that 9-month gap, as you had mentioned, it's so hard. And then especially, which is a great point, Dennis, to keep those followers engaged during that 9-month span, because, just as quickly as you got them, you could lose them too. That's humongous. And now, what are your thoughts there on how to keep those people, especially in Slovenia too?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of cadence, Double J. You got to be able to every so often throw something out there, and maybe you get a great guest like after Mike Stubbs was let go. John knows Mike really well, and we got him on just soon after, he was his contract wasn't renewed. So you have to, basically what you got to do is you got to dive into your phone and look at your contacts and say, who would be a good guest here, right? And doesn't have to be Rob Blake or Luke Robitaille. It could be somebody, it could be a foreign player. And the thing is that you have so much off time, people do want to talk, right? So if we wanted Bernie Nichols to talk, he'd probably come on tomorrow. So you can find people, LA related, that can come on and talk. But again, it's what are you going to be talking about? Right? It's not anything about the guests. It's like, okay, we're in this inertia here. We've talked about the draft. We talked about prospects. We know who's going to go number 2. We've talked about that. Now what? There really isn't much unless a player wants, like, we're tight with Matt Luff. Say, hey, Luff, you want to come on, talk about what you're doing this summer or whatever? Yeah. Or if they have a cause to talk about. But if you put an hour show on King's Running, it would be a challenge. We'll probably do one next week, but after that, there may be a dark period, and it's not us. It's just the sign of the times, Joe, to be honest with you. I think there's some brand equity that we got. So I think that, by the time we get to the end of the summer, September, maybe we do a look at free agency, even if it's November 1st. What can they do? And I don't think this team will do a lot in free agency. I just think there'll be gaps here. And there would have been natural gaps in the summertime anyway. It's just, again, the circumstance of having 9 months between games of consequence is just, hopefully it's once in a lifetime thing that we're dealing with, but we might find 1 or 2 pathways to produce some content, but I couldn't expect that we do something monthly. It just isn't enough unless some major trade happened or something, earth-shattering happened, which I don't happen, because free agency won't happen until November 1st. That would be the next move, the draft, obviously, but then free agency is going to, and those going to be like in tandem. It's going to be back to back. So you're going to have a situation from August to probably, 2-3 months there where it'll be a struggle. So maybe we'll pop on, but only if I'm not creating an episode just to create an episode because the fans need something. Got to be something of value. So if we find a really good guest, they'll come on maybe for a long form interview like we're doing here. Maybe that's one way to do it, but it'll definitely be a struggle. But I think we've built enough brand equity with Kings of the Podcast that whenever we come back or when we do it in rotation, people will still listen.
Yeah. Now with everything going on and with, these down times, if you will, the LA Kings not coming back to the return to play format. Obviously where you are, we just passed June gloom, in the LA area, and summer is, there really is no winter season in Los Angeles. There's no fall in LA. It's just spring and summer really, or mainly summer, obviously. And especially when I've been out there too, it's always been disgustingly hot in January, or the one time I go, it rains and SoFi Stadium gets pushed back a year because I was out there. Yeah, of course. The 1 week that I was out there in January, a little fun story for you. That was when I think LA had like the most rain in like 3 or 4 years. Yeah, figures. Yeah. But we need something to look forward to now that summer is officially here. And we've done this with every single guest, Dennis. So this is not, this is not the first time we're doing this. We have asked all 26 of our guests. That includes Randy Hahn, Dan Rusanowski, Brett Hedigan, and more hockey guys as well, who will be on in the future. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate chip mint.
Chocolate chip mint. Okay, we have to write that down there. Chocolate chip mint. Okay.
Close second, pistachio.
Okay, well, both are firsts. Pretty good for that. I like that. That's nice. Now, final question for you, because actually final 2 questions, if you will.
Okay.
Now again, as we spoke about earlier, you're out in LA. You were born here, second life out there. In your hockey career, 20 years you've been out here, who is the biggest inspiration to you to keep you going, to get you into the hockey world?
You sent me this question prior to, and I'm a self-made man, Joe. Me. I don't think there's anybody I aspire to. Like, I've had friends along the way. I think Helene Elliott early on, when I talked about being a personality and how at some point, this transition from being like writer to being personality. And I asked her about that. And she basically said, look, the lines are starting to be blurred. So just embrace it. Like, find your voice and stuff like that. So the one person that I always looked up to, and again, she nominated me to come into the PHWA. So I think that would be the one from a writing standpoint, I'll never approach her as a writer in a million. Like, she's just so gifted, so knowledgeable. She's, forgotten more than I know. So I think that'd be the one person that like really I try to role model myself after. Now, we're totally different personalities. I am out there. She is very, unassuming. So it's very, very different. So I think that's it. But I think it was just like, I just wanted to, Joe, I always go back. People go, why do you want to do this? And it's very simplistic. I wanted to get the hockey games for free. That's the reason I got into media. I don't want to pay for a ticket anymore. And it morphed into this thing 20 years later. But I think Helene showed me the right way to do things. And what a better role model. Like I said, like one of the first women ever to be in an NHL locker room, an Emma Ferguson winner. So I think that would be the one person that you can latch on to someone like that, and you can get their time. Any aspiring media person can find a person like that has that much knowledge, and you can latch onto them and bounce things off them. That's the one thing. That's the one person I would look at it saying, like, who not showed me the way, but like showed me the path. Right. Yeah. This is how you should do things. And this is it. And every so often she would give me a tip in the scrum or something like that. So I think that would be the one person I would say that really taught me like the right things to do in a locker room and how to approach dealing with players and PR.
Yeah. It's definitely, I like the way you said that too, with, not really showing you the way, but the path to get to where you are today. It's really amazing. And to hear your story, Dennis, for the last hour has been absolutely amazing, because it just shows that, things that you might not think could happen could eventually happen. And then you're on your way to Stockholm. You're on your way to Finland. You're also on your way to Boston to watch a Game 7 and see St. Louis, lift the cup for the first time ever, to go to Stadium Series games, to cover more or 8 consecutive Stanley Cup, Stanley Cup final games, or a Stanley Cup series, as final series, if you will, is amazing. And just, it's great to have you on, Dennis. I really appreciate it. And I know all of our viewers out there have really appreciated to hear your story as well.
Well, Double J, anytime you want me back, I'll be happy to come back on. But look, it's okay to have dreams. It's okay to aspire. It's good to, you know what, I will tell you this. My one word of advice to somebody out there, find your passion, and then try to monetize it. But because if you're not passionate, you wind up like I was, like a boring ass accountant who was really going through life in mediocrity. And look, do I thought going forward I would have unearthed this personality? Never. But find your passion and try to monetize it. And look, your passion may wind up being just an incredible hobby, and you may have to go on and do something else to pay the bills, because this is the lives that we live in and the country that we live in. But go find your passion and pursue it. Try to monetize it. And if you can't, just embrace it still. Like, you could still write about hockey and do podcasts and stuff like that. If it doesn't work, go out and get the regular job and do what I did for a long time. Do both, right? So I just pursue your passion, but make sure you find your passion, because it's going to enrich your life. Look, I hit the jackpot. I'm not saying that everybody it's hit the same jackpot I have to be at my level, but if you can't go through life without passions and fulfilling them, you're going to live just a normal life. And I don't think anybody wants to do that.
Fair. And again, obviously we're about to be in the closing credits, but I do have to ask you this. I see you're also a cigar guy.
Oh,
and I am also a cigar guy as well. I'm a big Cohiba guy. What is your favorite cigar?
Opus X Lost City.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I was not expecting that one. That's definitely a first on the new Primetime Rundown cigar list. That's great. Dennis Bernstein, everybody, the fourth period senior writer since 2006, and will continue in post Red Bull retirement era. Really, really appreciate you, Dennis, coming on, and we'd love to have you back on our main podcast and talk some hockey as well. That would be a lot of fun for you to join us as well. Me and my two buddies we'll be getting that back on in sooner than later. So again, thank you so much for being with us. And episode number 28 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series, if you will feature Philadelphia Flyers AHL affiliate Lehigh Valley Phantoms forward Curtis Gabriel on Monday night, July 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. For Dennis Bernstein, I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us, the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks, we'll see you next time. All right, Dennis, that was very good stuff, man. Really, really appreciate it. Appreciate your time as well.
No, hey, great questions, bud. Anytime you need me, by all means, please.
I really